Right now, less than 60 miles from downtown Seattle, there's a mountain that the United States Geological Survey considers the single most dangerous volcano in the entire country when it comes to human life. Not because it is about to erupt. It is not. Its alert level right now sits at green, normal, the lowest possible setting on the scale. And that is exactly why this story matters. This is not a video about an eruption that is coming. This is a video about why scientists watch one specific mountain more closely than almost any other volcano in America, year after year, decade after decade, even when nothing at all appears to be happening. Stay tuned to understand the hidden mechanics behind America's most watched mountain. This is Mount Rainier, a postcard-perfect snow-capped peak that towers over one of the fastest-growing metropolitan regions in the entire United States, visible from office windows in downtown Seattle on a clear day, climbed by thousands of hikers every single summer, and monitored around the clock by one of the densest volcano monitoring networks on the planet. Today, we are going to break down exactly why the USGS ranks it the way it does, what happened just last year that put every seismologist in the Pacific Northwest on edge for weeks, and why the real danger here has almost nothing to do with lava. No guessing, no dramatizing, just the facts, the science, and the real stakes. Drop a comment right now. Have you ever visited Mount Rainier, or do you live somewhere near it? Tell me where you were and whether you knew about any of this before today. If you want to be the first to know every time something major develops with volcanoes or earthquakes across this country, subscribe to the channel right now. It is completely free. A thumbs up also helps enormously. Let us go for 5,000 likes on this one so the algorithm actually shows it to the people who need to see it. Thank you. Now, let us get into it. Stay safe. Let us start with the ranking itself, because the number alone tells only part of the story. In 2018, the USGS updated its formal National Volcanic Threat Assessment, scoring 161 potentially active volcanoes across the United States. They looked at 24 separate factors, from a volcano's explosive history to the number of people living in its shadow. On that overall list, Mount Rainier ranks third in the nation, behind Hawaii's Kilauea and Washington's own Mount St. Helens. But overall threat score is not the same question as danger to human life specifically. On that narrower, arguably more important measure, Mount Rainier is considered the most dangerous volcano in the United States, full stop. The reason comes down to one word, lahars. It's worth understanding why Mount St. Helens itself That disaster fundamentally reshaped how this country monitors its volcanoes, directly leading to the creation of the National Volcano Early Warning System that ranks Rainier, St. Helens, and every other major volcano in the country today. But here's the critical difference that makes Rainier's specific danger so hard to prepare for using the same playbook. St. Helens gave clear, physically visible warning signs for 2 full months before it erupted. A bulging mountainside is something you can literally watch grow, day by day, with surveying instruments. Mount Rainier's greatest hazard does not require that kind of buildup at all. As USGS hazard documentation itself acknowledges, at least one past lahar at this mountain began with no known eruption whatsoever. That is precisely why Rainier's monitoring strategy looks so different from what worked at St. Helens. You cannot simply watch for a bulge and wait. You have to watch the ground itself continuously for the earliest possible signs of movement, because the mountain has already demonstrated it doesn't need permission from an eruption to become catastrophic. A lahar is a volcanic mudflow, a fast-moving slurry of ice, rock, ash, and water that can race down a river valley at highway speeds. Mount Rainier is uniquely built to produce them. The mountain carries 26 glaciers, more combined ice than any other Cascade volcano. It also carries something less visible, hundreds of feet of rock deep inside that has been chemically weakened over thousands of years. Acidic volcanic gas and hot water have turned solid stone into something closer to wet clay. You do not need an eruption to send it downhill. A moderate earthquake, a partial collapse of weakened rock, or burst of volcanic heat melting glacial ice can all be enough. Deep inside Rainier, volcanic gases rich in sulfur compounds mix continuously with circulating groundwater, creating a mildly acidic hydrothermal soup. This soup has been slowly attacking the minerals in the surrounding volcanic rock for thousands of years. in some cases longer. This process, which geologists call hydrothermal alteration, doesn't happen quickly, and it doesn't happen everywhere in the mountain equally. It concentrates in specific zones, carving out pockets of weak, crumbly rock scattered through what looks like a solid mountain. Researchers use electrical resistivity surveys and other geophysical techniques to map where these weak zones sit inside Rainier. Knowing their location is essential to understanding which slopes are actually at greatest risk of giving way first. This is not theoretical. About 5,600 years ago, a massive lahar known as the Osceola mudflow broke loose from Rainier and traveled roughly 70 miles. It flowed all the way to what is now Puget Sound, burying the very ground where entire towns sit today. That exact path runs directly through Orting, Puyallup, Sumner, and Auburn, home today to more than 80,000 people living inside mapped lahar hazard zones. The Seattle-Tacoma metropolitan area, home to 4 million people, sits close enough that emergency planners take this threat seriously every single day. Osceola was not a one-time event, and it was not even the most recent close call. Geologists have documented at least 60 separate lahars. The most recent major example, the electron mudflow, is unsettling because of how ordinary the day appeared to be beforehand. Roughly 500 to 600 years ago, a section of the mountain's flank simply gave way, with no accompanying eruption whatsoever. It sent a lahar surging 34 miles down the valley, burying an area of roughly 13 square miles under sediment 26 feet deep. USGS researchers later confirmed there was no eruption event. Rainier has already demonstrated that it doesn't need one to be dangerous. To understand why this is treated with such seriousness, it helps to look at a similar volcano, Nevado del Ruiz in Colombia. On November 13, 1985, a modest eruption melted part of the ice cap, triggering a lahar that swept down the Azufrado River Valley. The town of Armero sat directly in its path. The lahar buried the town almost entirely, resulting in one of the deadliest volcanic disasters. Scientists found that warnings were issued, but communication broke down at exactly the moment they mattered most. Volcanologists point to Armero when discussing Rainier, because it shows what happens when a community isn't prepared to respond within minutes. Rainier's danger rating has nothing to do with how often it erupts. It could sit in silence for decades and still be the most dangerous. The geography and geology beneath it never actually rest. The USGS describes a Rainier lahar in blunt physical terms. It can reach 100 feet in height and travel at 50 miles per hour, moving like flowing concrete, capable of destroying most structures. Because of that speed, Pierce County built one of the only volcano-specific lahar warning systems in the country. Today, that system includes acoustic flow monitors on the mountain's flanks, feeding data to a monitoring computer. The system is connected to a network of dozens of outdoor warning sirens spread across towns from Orting to the port of Tacoma. Residents in high-risk zones have as little as 1 hour from detection to the moment a lahar could reach their area. It's worth being precise about just how tight that window really is, because the numbers vary meaningfully depending on where you live along the valley. Emergency planning documents estimate that Orting, sitting closest to the mountain, could have as little as 30 to 60 minutes of warning in a worst-case scenario. Communities further downstream, like Sumner and Puyallup, would likely have somewhat more in the range of 60 to 90 minutes. That's barely enough time for a coordinated evacuation, which is why sirens are tested monthly, and local schools conduct regular lahar evacuation drills. There's also a slower moving factor working against Rainier over the coming decades that deserves honest mention: a warming climate. Rainier's glaciers, responsible for the mountain's lahar potential, have been retreating overall, consistent with broader glacier loss trends worldwide. A warming climate increases the frequency of rapid melt events and can accelerate the freeze-thaw cycles that break weakened rock apart. It's one more reason the monitoring network around Rainier isn't a finished project. It's updated because conditions on the mountain keep shifting. The sirens are tested at noon on the first Monday of most months, using a distinctive Westminster chime so it cannot be mistaken for a real alert. If that whale tone ever sounds outside of a test, the instruction is simple: get to higher ground right away without waiting for further confirmation. Evidence shows at least one past lahar at Mount Rainier began with no eruption at all, which is why the network watches for ground movement directly. Now, let us talk about what actually happened last year. On July 8, 2025, seismometers began detecting an earthquake swarm unlike anything recorded before. Monitoring stations were picking up dozens of small earthquakes per hour. Over the following weeks, scientists located more than 1,350 individual earthquakes. At its absolute peak, scientists recorded 41 earthquakes in a single hour. For comparison, Mount Rainier typically produces around 9 earthquakes a month. This swarm dwarfed the previous record from 2009. It is a stark reminder that this mountain is alive and constantly monitored for our safety. Here is what I want you to understand about how scientists actually responded, because it says everything about how careful, methodical science works under pressure. They did not panic, and they did not stay silent either. The USGS immediately issued public information statements, keeping the alert level at green. They got to work using every tool available to figure out what was actually happening deep inside the mountain. A volcanic gas flight was conducted directly over the summit, specifically to check for one very telling signal: sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide reliably shows up when fresh magma is on the move. The flight detected none. Ground deformation instruments, which detect surface swelling as magma pushes upward from below, showed nothing unusual either. By late August, the swarm had decayed down to less than one located earthquake per day, essentially fading out entirely. The conclusion was that this sequence, the largest ever recorded at Rainier, was almost certainly caused by hydrothermal fluid. This means hot water and gas moving through cracks and fault systems deep inside the volcano, rather than magma rising. This is a genuinely important distinction, and it is worth sitting with for a moment instead of rushing past it. Rainier has an extensive hydrothermal system, similar to what powers geysers at Yellowstone, but occurring inside a stratovolcano capped with ice. That system's shifting and cracking rock can generate real earthquakes, powerful enough to be startling on a seismograph, without an eruption. The Yellowstone comparison is worth extending, because it illustrates why this hydrothermal activity is a double-edged sword for monitoring. At Rainier, that same fluid circulation is doing something far less visible. It is the primary suspect behind chemical alteration. It has weakened hundreds of feet of rock deep inside the mountain's core over thousands of years, creating a major lahar risk. The hydrothermal system is not a separate story from the lahar danger. It is part of the same underlying mechanism. It is manufacturing the unstable rock that could, someday, without any eruption at all, break loose and start moving downhill. Nothing about the 2025 swarm suggested an imminent eruption. The alert level never moved. No evacuation was ever discussed. This was a genuine scientific opportunity. Rainier is watched by one of the densest volcano monitoring networks in the country. Scientists got an unprecedented look at how the mountain's plumbing behaves during a major stress event, improving future detection. So here is the honest picture of why this mountain keeps scientists paying closer attention than almost any other volcano. It is a combination that almost no other volcano shares: explosive history, weakened rock, and 26 glaciers sitting on top, and a river valley system leading straight down into some of the most densely populated real estate in the Pacific Northwest. It is the combination that means scientists will keep this mountain wired with instruments and keep watching it closely, year after year. Mount Rainier is not dangerous because of what it is doing right now. It is dangerous because of what has already happened to the rock, and because of exactly who is living in the path it has already proven it is capable of taking. Compare that one more time to St. Helens, because the contrast is really the whole point of this video. St. Helens taught America how to watch for a volcano that announces itself before it erupts, a bulge you can measure, a swarm you can track toward a specific date. Rainier represents the harder, quieter problem, a mountain whose worst-case scenario doesn't necessarily need an eruption at all, just the wrong combination of weakened rock, glacial ice, and enough ground shaking on the wrong afternoon. That is precisely why the lahar warning sirens in Orting and Puyallup are tested on the first Monday of every single month, rain or shine, eruption or no eruption. Nobody's waiting for Rainier to announce itself the way St. Helens did. The entire monitoring philosophy here is built around the assumption that it might not. It's worth remembering, too, that Rainier is not being watched in isolation. It sits alongside 4 other major Cascade volcanoes in Washington state alone: Mount Baker, Glacier Peak, Mount Adams, and St. Helens, all part of the same broader monitoring effort run out of the Cascades Volcano Observatory in Vancouver, Washington. Since the year 1780, 4 of these 5 volcanoes have shown some form of eruptive activity, a reminder that this entire mountain range is genuinely alive, not a scattering of dormant relics. Rainier simply happens to combine the single largest ice cap in the range with the single largest number of people living directly downstream, which is exactly the combination that keeps it at the very top of the list, year after year, regardless of what any individual seismograph happens to be recording on any given week. We will keep tracking this one closely because Rainier's hydrothermal system is still active and scientists are still analyzing everything the 2025 swarm taught them. Subscribe so you do not miss the next update on any of America's most closely watched volcanoes. Drop a comment and tell me if you have ever been to Mount Rainier or if you live somewhere in its shadow. Let us push for 5,000 likes on this video so the algorithm puts it in front of the people who genuinely need to see it. We will see you in the next one.